President, I applaud the remarks of our distinguished majority leader, and I know it comes from the heart because what he is saying publicly, he's also always said both publicly and privately. And I also join with him in the condemnation of the attack in the synagogue this weekend. I know in my state of Vermont, the faith community, the Jewish, Protestant, Catholic, all came together with prayers for the safety of the people in the synagogue. But more than just the safety of what happened then, let us pray, all of us, whatever faith we have, that such attacks do not continue in our country. We've seen too many attacks against people based on their religion, or based on their race, or based on their country of origin. That's wrong. In this country especially. I was thinking of this when I led the Senate this morning in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I thought, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Well, it's a constant battle to make sure there's that liberty and justice for all, and we have to do that. And that leads us to where we are today, Mr. President. We have got to stand up and say people can vote. I remember being here and present when the Voting Rights Act was signed by President Reagan, President George H.W. Bush, and President George Bush. I remember the pleasure on their face, the look of everybody around them, Republicans and Democrats, applauding the president for signing that legislation. And why do they applaud? Why did Republicans and Democrats applaud? Because we'd all voted for it. Because we all believed in a person's right to vote. You know, Mr. President, I'm the only Democrat ever elected to the U.S. Senate in the state of Vermont. And I remember my first two elections, which were quite close. 90%, I would say approximately 90% of the election machinery, those who count the ballots and whatnot, were controlled by Republicans. But I had faith in getting through because I knew two things. One, they could count, and two, they were totally honest. And while I'm sure, especially in the first election, the vast majority of them voted for my opponent, an honorable person, they counted the ballots, and they said where we were. So much so that there was a recount in my second election. It was so close. And I remember one of the Republican lobbying groups sent out a fundraiser saying we have to fight the Democratic-controlled election machinery of Vermont. And I reminded them the election machinery were 250 town clerks, 80 to 90% of whom were Republicans. And I said again, they can count and they're honest. We're fortunate in our state that we encourage everybody to vote. And I remember when the senators, the other party at a judiciary committee said, well, you want to change the rules so the Democrats would win. I said, well, you want nationally the kind of rules we follow in Vermont. And by the way, last year's election, we elected a Republican governor and a Democratic lieutenant governor. Why? Because our rules do not favor one party over the other. Our rules favor one thing, the right to vote. And we insist on that in our state of Vermont, but we should insist on that throughout the country. It should not be a case where somebody can be, where somebody can be blocked from voting because the voting booths and the places for them are changed, so that some communities would have a harder time or a more difficult time to come there, or hours change. No, we should be fighting. If we want America to be the strong, great nation that we all claim it is, and we all believe it is, and we all want it to be, it can only be if we say, make sure everybody gets to vote. Everybody. I don't care who they're voting for. Make sure everybody can vote. Because what happens when people are blocked from voting and voting drops off, people lose faith in their government. If we lose faith in our government, we lose faith in our country. We lose faith in our country, this wonderful experiment in democracy, as some called it a couple hundred years ago, fails. We can't have that, Mr. President. We can't have that. So I look back my 48 years here in the Senate. And I think of, it's not the titles, it's not the chairmanships, it's not the president pro tem, it's not being dean of the Senate that I cherish. It's knowing that I can vote. I can vote. I voted 17,000 times, more than that now. And I go back over all those votes and find some, I might think, gee, I should have voted differently. Of course I can, but I voted. I can vote. And I call on my colleagues, vote up or down. I would hope that all of us would do as we have in the past when I've been in the Senate. When we passed Voting Rights Act 98-0, when Republican presidents were signing the Voting Rights Act, let's go back to that time. Vote any way you want in a presidential election. Vote any way you want in gubernatorial, congressional, and local elections. But in this body which should be the conscience of the nation, vote to uphold the right to vote. Vote to allow every American the ability to vote. Don't hide behind procedure. Stand on the floor. Have the courage and the honesty to say, I'm going to vote to allow people to vote, or I'm going to vote not to allow people to vote. But stand here and say what you're going to do. The last time 98 of us stood here and voted, we want everybody to vote, Republicans and Democrats. We joined together. Wouldn't that send a wonderful signal to a fractured nation if we did that today and stood up and said, we're going to vote. We're all going to vote. We can vote yes or no, but we're going to let people of our state know how we voted. We're going to let the American people know how we voted. We can say why we voted. I would wish we voted as we did before, to say to all Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, any part of this country, we want you to vote. We'll urge you to vote the way we'd like, but we want you to have the ability to vote even if you're voting for our opponents or for a different point of view. The most important thing as Americans, as United States Senators, is to say we stand for the right of people to vote. Every one of us, every single one of us. Mr. President, I have more to say on this matter later, but I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.